Hello and welcome back to NewsX World. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching Focal Length, where we get you a briefing on topics from across the world. Europe's pursuit of strategic autonomy is being tested, particularly in Greenland. Recent US pressure on Denmark over greater control on the world's largest island exposes Europe's limited freedom when a NATO ally can be coerced. Despite Europe's defence increases due to the Ukraine war, does this simply deepen Europe's reliance on US-led security? Europe remains economically tied to China. Can it really achieve strategic autonomy while maintaining this deepened independence? To discuss this, we're joined by Sascha Faxe, a Danish politician and a member of the Folketing, representing the ecologist political party, the Alternative. Thank you very much for joining us, Sascha. It's a pleasure to have you on the programme. Let's get straight into this. Of course, Europe speaks constantly about strategic autonomy. It still depends overwhelmingly on the United States and NATO for deterrence. Is strategic autonomy a realistic destination or a political narrative masking dependence?
So for right now, it's not realistic, but it's something that's needing to go on for a while before we're there. But it's not like we need to be independent in every matter. We believe in open economy. We believe in trade with the rest of the world. We have a trade agreement with India and many other countries. So it's on strategic areas. And that is the strategy that we're pursuing. But of course, after 80 years of intertwining with the rest of NATO and the rest of the world after Second World War, it will take a few years before we're there.
Yeah, and of course, the east of the continent has been plagued with war for nearly 4 years now. Has the prolonged war pushed European states to raise defence spending and expand arms production? Does this strengthen Europe as an independent actor or simply deepen its integration into a US-led security architecture?
Not per se, because the US has actually been a very huge part of the strategy for the defense of Ukraine. So that has not actually put US outside of the equation. What has put it there is the whole debate about the sovereignty of Greenland. So that's where that has pushed that part of it.
And of course, Europe remains economically intertwined with China, while increasingly describing Beijing as a systemic rival in terms of national security. Can true strategic autonomy exist alongside such deep economic interdependence?
I'm not sure about that. And I must also say that within Europe and even within Denmark, we do not necessarily agree on what strategy should be here. My party has all along been very critical in this very strong dependence on China. It doesn't again mean China should be out, but we should have a critical way of going about it. So it's a balance. We need to find a way where we are independent on the strategic levels. That means food security, defense, cyber, digital areas, and so forth. But on other areas, it's important that we collaborate across the globe. So it's not like, again, China or any other country should not just per se be out in the cold, but we need to find a way where we can go about it and actually be ready to move if things come up like we have seen with the US currently.
And Greenland has suddenly become a flashpoint after US pressure on Denmark and public statements about expanded American control. Does this episode expose how limited Europe's strategic autonomy really is?
I think actually this exposes quite a number of things. So yes, of course, it does expose something about Europe, but on the other hand, we have seen Europe standing stronger together than they have done in most other matters since Second World War. So in some way, it exposes a Europe that is willing to stand on their beliefs and their unity, but it also exposes that international agreements and treaties and so forth are very important, because the US have not signed as many treaties as other countries. They're not bound by human rights or other conventions that we have agreed on. And when they're not that actually lays bare an international collaboration. So for me, it really exposes that a rule-based world order is very important for all of us, especially small countries, but not only. And it also exposes that when an ally turns upon long-term allies, it does give waves into not only those who are affected, but the whole world. I mean, I'm talking to you today. You are not from Europe. So I have seen that it does impact stock markets, trade, but also living conditions around the world, that there are these disagreements. So for me, it's actually really pointing out, let's stand stronger together. Let's be able to care for ourselves in our regions, but we also need to move closer together and make some really solid agreements on how we interact and how we protect each other.
Just wondering, of course, Donald Trump's pressure on Greenland has, of course, dialed down since Davos, really. However, deals are still being negotiated when it comes to that Arctic security deal, which is supposedly being put forward. I guess what is the feeling now that Donald Trump has ruled out military force to take Greenland, and possibly, of course, the deal that Denmark is still going to remain a part of the Kingdom of Denmark? Has life in Danish politics been a lot less stressful since that day that Trump spoke at Davos?
By all means, it's cooled down. It took a few days, but it's cooled down in intensity, especially on the global stage. But it doesn't mean that the issue is not still present. And we are also not, I mean, we have been back and forth with this for over a year. And even in his first term, Trump talked about Greenland. So for us, it's not, we need to have something more before we rest assured that this is off the table. So for us, it's still something going on as we speak today on this Thursday. We see that there are negotiations going on in the high-level working group in Washington. It's not necessarily a new agreement, but it's actually to see how can we secure that the U.S. feel that Arctic security gives them a good feeling and they know what is going on, because that seems like they have not had enough knowledge, that they have not felt secure enough in terms of that. So those negotiations are going on. So it's still an open case for us. It's still ongoing. It's just not unfolding in the press as for the right now.
Of course, Greenland is the world's largest island, but it's got a tiny population, around 57,000 people. We've seen representatives from there meet with the likes of J.D. Vance, but of course only accompanied with Danish officials as well, the foreign ministers, etc. Has it been? Have you heard it's been hard to integrate those officials from such a small territory into such a superpower with the United States, and have the United States been taking what Greenlanders really want seriously?
So those are two very different questions, actually. So we have seen that the Greenlanders have done an amazing job. I am deeply impressed by how they have moved from living as the peace-loving and very respectful country and population they are on a daily basis into the world stage. They've done an amazing job. So that's one part. I mean, I'm so proud of being within the same union as them. The other part, how is Trump taking this seriously? I don't think actually Trump really cares about populations around the world. Right now, we have seen Trump come out with a statement about Iran and how he wants to act with them. And the three demands he has made are not about how Iran treats their own population. It's about atomic bombs and so forth. It's only about security. So for me, that's a very good indicator of the US and Trump not being interested in the Greenlandic population. Of course, they have respected them when they came to meetings. I mean, that has in the interrelationship between the human to human in meetings, it's been okay. But I don't think that the Trump administration really cares about the populations in Greenland or Iran or any other country for that matter, seen from what we see how they act.
And moving on from, of course, that huge issue, let's turn to over more European Union topics. Internal political fragmentation across the EU, including the rise of nationalist and far-right parties in Europe. It's been rife. Has complicated common foreign policy here. You can cite the likes of Viktor Orban and Slovakia and others. Is Europe's greatest obstacle autonomy, internal rather than external, as more governments change like they have done recently?
I would actually say both and, because also when we see the rise of the right wing, it's also an expression of a well-functioning democracy, despite me not being in agreement with what they stand for and how they look at people and the world. It's still an expression of democracy. And that is a core value. That's what we believe in. That's what we are here to protect. So in that sense, we are still autonomous. But of course, we have, as I said before, interwoven ourselves with the rest of the globe, especially since Second World War, on many levels, politically, financially, economically, culturally, and so forth. So of course, that stands in a way. But the European Union is an interesting thing, because we are nation states, but we also have the union that can decide laws. And on some levels, it's just normal voting, and at other areas, it needs to be unanimity. And that is where the challenge is, especially when we see countries that, after they entered the union, are moving into a different place. So if it was today, Hungary would even not be eligible to be a member of the European Union, because they have stepped out of some international agreements. For instance, the Rome Statute as just one, with the ICC and ICJ as part of it. So that is, of course, interesting. How do we handle that? And we're also looking into that. We want to expand. A number of countries are interested in joining the EU. And from my party's part and myself, is we're saying, then if this needs to happen, we also need to find a way where we get more maneuverable in terms of making those kind of agreements. Because right now we are seeing it's very often that the Hungarians need to go to the restroom during a conversation, because then the rest of Europe can move, or they need to go and have a phone conversation. I mean, they need to take themselves out of the room, because that makes Europe maneuverable. And that is, of course, not a long-term solution. It works for now, but it's not a long-term solution. And the other part of this nationalism is very interesting, because countries like Hungary or the Czech Republic or whoever might stand in the way at some times also need Europe, because what has become clear in this process, especially with Ukraine and with the US as it is for now, is that we are dependent on each other. So it's also hard for them to stand on that closed-knit borders around themselves and how they maneuver in these countries, because they are so dependent on Europe, and that's a hard one to navigate for them.
Indeed. And finally, in a broad sense of course, the month and the start of a new year, are we moving towards a genuinely multipolar world now, or simply a bipolar US-China rivalry with Europe stuck in an uncomfortable middle?
So before this, I would have said, yes, we are moving towards a multipolar world, which has not been bad. We need to innovate how we're doing things in the world. The UN system is structured around an uneven way of doing things, a colonial way, imperialistic way of doing things, because that's what the world looked like after the Second World War. Today, we're seeing that the global South are not represented fully enough. It's not democratic enough. Even Africa does not, the whole continent of Africa does not have a permanent seat at the Security Council. That's not viable in the long run. So that needs to change. But after what we have seen, both before Christmas, but also coming after New Year, is, I would say, in some ways, it looks like three superpowers are trying to divide the world in between themselves. And that's China, Russia, and the US. And so I'm not so sure if I would say multipolar anymore, but tripolar actually is what it feels like right now. So I think most countries, both Europe, Africa, South America, India, many other countries would have an interest in a more multipolar way of navigating. But we also need the structures to hold us in that, because conflicts are more diverse, and we also need a way to handle that together. So a stronger UN would be very desirable, seen from my perspective. I'm aware that it's going in the wrong direction in that right now, but a stronger UN would be a way to hold us together in this world, to sustain peace and prosperity.
Sascha Faxe, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to speak to you here on Focal Length. Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, it is a wrap on this episode. For more international news and updates, stay tuned on NewsX World.